Everyone, this is Chris, and you're listening to One Cross Radio. And today we are joined by the always awesome Christian Dobson. Christian, how you doing today?
Hey, man. I jumped the gun on that intro. It's so weird. Like, we're talking,
I'm thankful that you
and
did.
then it's like we have an intro, and then it's like I have to say hi to you again, right? And so it's like,
yeah. We've been talking for a solid hour and like 20 minutes, and then now let's do the episode. So, dear listener, on today's episode of Into the Weeds, I don't know where we're going, but that's generally how this goes. But there is one point. Our friend Darko shared with Christian and I and the other guys what quite possibly be the worst cover I have ever heard. It was Puddle of Mud, who I didn't know were still a thing, covering Nirvana's About a Girl. It elicited some strong feelings.
yeah, I didn't like it. Yeah, yeah, it was so bad. I mean, what really made me angry was that he starts singing, and it's for the first like few words you're kind of like, okay, he's just finding his footing, right? And then what you realize is that he had found his footing and he's just expanding on it, right? Like he's like, oh no, I'm where I want to be. I haven't taken up a large enough area of crap yet, right? Like, and then the way he looks at the camera right before, it's just with like pure unadulterated rage. Like he knows how you're gonna feel about what's about to happen, and he doesn't care. He's defiant, right? He's like, I'm doing it anyway. You're going to listen to this. You're going to experience this. It's going to happen to you, okay? And then he does it. And it's just like, it's not in key, and he's raising his voice in weird places, and he's trying to make it break, like in just crap places, like in places where like someone who's never had to do that before, that's where they would decide to try and make that happen, like for the first time ever on national radio. I don't... But yeah, the other thing that ticked me off was that we did a cover for that in the talent show in East York Collegiate, and they kicked us off. And it sucks because that was our first song. Our first song was About a Girl. Second song was Out of the Way by the Vines. Arguably not only a better song, but we did it way better. We were just like, here, we'll give them this at first, and we'll bust out the big guns. And they're like, next. And I'm thinking, we got next right there. And these guys are on Sirius XM. We're watching them on YouTube. We had to have been better than that.
I admittedly got like maybe 30 seconds into the video. I couldn't keep going. It was one of those things where I'm like, as it's happening to me, I'm just like, I have the power to end this, so I'm going to.
I don't have a lot of control over almost anything in my life, but this is
I don't have to subject myself to this.
Yeah, this doesn't have to happen to me.
It was like I shared with you guys, like as I was walking Luna, it was so weird because there's that internet meme where it's like, well, they had us in the first half, where in this case it was like the first like 4 or 5 seconds before he started singing. I was like, okay, the instrumentation's good. Like this could be good.
Well, I liked what they were doing. They had some good
percussion
going on. They had some,
exactly. Like I haven't heard Puddle of Mud in ages. Like I said, I legitimately thought they were gone. Because there's bands from the 2000s that are still going. Like Papa Roach is still going. Interestingly, Disturbed, but they kind of went into like a more metal territory and away from the new metal sound. So you're like, okay, well they changed, they adapted, like, so of course they're still going. But Puddle of Mud, I'm like, they just dropped off the face of the earth.
Well, you know, literally, it's weird. You know what I think? I think there's no difference whatsoever between Puddle of Mud or Nine Inch Nails. So what I don't understand is how they're both still around making music. I'm like, Puddle of Mud, Limp Bizkit, Nine Inch Nails, Korn. It's all the same, right? It's all the exact same band.
Which, okay, so hear me out, because I know I am crazy critical. I almost said quitical.
Crazy cupcakes.
Critical. Quasi cupcakes.
There's such thing as a backwards W. Yeah, there is.
I know I am very critical of Limp Bizkit, and rightfully
Yep.
so. Because what were we thinking? What was anybody thinking? But it's weird. I got to give them some kind of credit. They did try different things. Like, they did show at least an attempt at some certain range. I'm not saying that range was good, but they at least tried other things. Like, I got to give them credit for that. This Puddle of Mud cover made their cover of friggin' Behind Blue Eyes like a magnum opus in comparison. And that's saying something. And that Limp Bizkit cover is not even the worst cover, but it's like, it's not, they use a speaking spell in it, man.
Yeah. There's like little dumb, ridiculous things that they're like, this is what art is. Or like, you know that meme with that dude where he's like, he has a butterfly like in his hands. He's like, is this art? And I think it's sort of what they were trying to do, but they're like, this is what artists do, right? But I think, dude, that cover, his vocals in it are very good. Like, especially in the beginning, before they get hard and it gets like that, just that wall of sound, Deftones wannabe chorus. There was a time when I heard it and I didn't realize that it was him, and I'm like, who the heck is this? And then it was him, and I'm like, man, why would, like, it seems like you got a good voice, it seems like you can perform, why would you do that?
Yeah. Why? What? It's weird because you don't want to pay Limp Bizkit a compliment because it just feels so wrong.
Well, Fred Durst, it's
aside from like the awesome. I'll give them credit. Their guitar intro for their theme song for Mission Impossible 2, that was good. Like, the guitar work there, I was like, okay, it's catchy, it works. You translated something from a different section of music to this, and you did it well before you started throwing in lyrics like, now I know why you want to hate me. Like, before you got into that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, it's I don't know, man. It's like they got their own idea. It's they lived in their own little reality, right? And they got to talk about the world the way they saw. It's fascinating.
I think it's because nu metal was like emo, like the emo-iest of emo, not even like good emo, like Weezer or Abandoned Pools, like, or even later My Chemical Romance, like bad emo. It was the emo-iest of emo plus like some of the bad stuff from metal, like, and then let's throw that in a pot, and then let's take some bad angst from rap and also throw that in this blender, and here's this sound, this audio turd of a sound.
Well, at least
few bands can pull that off. Rage Against the Machine was friggin' amazing. If you want good rap metal, that's who you look at. You look at Rage.
Like, okay, we're not like, okay, let's not, okay, well, let's taper back. We got a lot to address here. Okay, so
I know. I'm sorry. It is into the weeds after all.
We talked about Limp Bizkit, and like I think when we talk about bands like My Chemical Romance or something, like, okay, so for MCR, I think, like, yeah, they were definitely like emo-ish. But when you look at, I think now MCR is a good example, but also a bad one, because I think they set themselves apart from any band that's like them. Like, I think they're one of those few bands where I'd be like, you got to give them credit, man. They are legit. But
dude,
I know you're not saying they're not.
Their Black Parade album,
one of the best.
Amazing.
One of the best albums I've ever heard. Yeah, hands down. Yeah, we're on the same page.
So a friend of mine. No. I'm just going to do it. A friend of mine, when I was working at Best Buy overnight, like, we'd get to choose the music every once in a while, and they'd rotate through us. So then he was like, "I'm going to play My Chemical Romance," and at that point, all I had heard was like,
but
Helena,
that's a great song,
or I'm Not Okay.
Helena's.
Oh, I know. It grew on me later. It absolutely grew on me later. It was early My Chemical Romance. I think for me, it was a case of the fans,
the scene,
ruining a band for me before I got to the band. So you got this notion about the band before you get to the band. Just like, there could be an amazing band that their fans ruin. For the longest time, I could not listen to Led Zeppelin, which sucks because Zeppelin's awesome.
Now we're talking about Zeppelin.
I know. It's for the similar point. It's for the similar point, though. But it was just these fans of Zeppelin were like bigging up Zeppelin so much over everybody else over this. Like, my frustration at those people bled over into the music. So then it was the similar case with My Chemical Romance. But that night he played Black Parade, and I was just like, this is a fantastic rock and roll album.
Yeah.
Like, it's got Queen, it's got Beatles harmonies. It's an outstanding record. it's a great
Well,
album.
it's amazing for so many reasons, dude. It's like they decided, they're like, we're gonna make songs in the vein of this band or this band or this band. Not only did they do it, they made good songs and they did it very well. So it's, I mean, if you're talking about an artist or a musician or a rock band, just all of it, any standard by which you're going to judge any of those things or these entities, they've exceeded those standards. They've excelled. I think they're amazing. But if we're talking about, like, you know, a lot of those emo bands, they had like the dignity of being like they weren't. I don't know, man. There's something. I don't know. There's something. It's almost like they had this awareness, like, yeah, we're dweebs, right? Like, we kind of get it. Yeah, we're kind of dweebs. Yeah. But with Limp Bizkit, we're like, no, we're hard as F. We're gonna go in there and we're gonna like mess stuff up and the world owes me and stuff like that. And it's just so like it's the biggest child. It's you can't respect anything about those people, Chris.
It's tapping. Like, I think it taps into that teenage. That very, like, not post-pubescent, but like that pubescent / early teenage angst, like that nobody understands me.
But you're 13, like, not kind of 30. Right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, that when you got to stuff like Behind Blue Eyes, which I know I made fun of, but to give it credit, it's surprisingly good. It's not like their Faith cover,
I think,
or their terrible cover of Sanitarium, but when you got stuff like that, you're like, that's the band I'm interested. That'd be the band I'd be interested in. When the rest of their stuff, it's like, dude, you're 13, but you're 30. You're still, and it's at times to like, oh man, I'm gonna go.
Well, look at
raw music.
Look at the Used.
Stay with me.
You know that song "Buried Myself Alive"? A grown man wrote that song, Chris. a grown adult man.
Right.
Whoa.
Right. It's just interesting when you get this kind of stuff, because it happens in movies as well. I know I'm segueing, and I promise I want to stay on the music piece, but it's just interesting. Okay, so I think the thing is, like, we're surprised by Limp Bizkit. Okay, we don't like Limp Bizkit. I think everyone knows why. Like, we don't have to explain why Limp Bizkit sucks, right? Like, I think it's interesting for us to really take it apart and understand, like, every little bit about why we're disgusted by Limp Bizkit. But I mean, like, I think everybody sort of gets it. But or anybody who puts out an album named "The Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavored Water."
It's like they were trolls. They're like, oh, you know, everything that you think music should be, we're going to go against it. But it's like, it's not like they were defying convention. They were just making bad music and saying they're defying convention, right? It's like, no, this music already existed. We already knew what bad music was, dude. It's not like you're making anything new. You just went like, oh, what's the opposite of good? This? We're doing that. We're breaking all the rules. It's like, no, you're following the worst rules, dude. You're following all the wrong rules. These are still rules. They're just the wrong ones. But I think, like, the thing is, like, why are we so, like, the cover of Behind Blue Eyes was so, like, obviously it wasn't as good as the original, but it was surprising. Right? It was surprising that they would do that and that he could do that. And that's one thing that's really, like, that's a sort of theme that's been going through my head lately, where we have these expectations of people, like with Doug Ford, and how everybody's saying that he's doing great. And it's like, dude, you only think the only reason anyone's saying that is because, like, A, he's not doing great. He's just doing the bare minimum. He's just doing his job, basically. The bare minimum, what you should expect from someone in that position. But B, the only reason we think that him doing the bare minimum of that's required is so great is because we had such a terrible opinion of him in the first place, right? And it's so fascinating because it's like, you know people who, like, you have you're like, oh, you have low expectations for, right? And all of a sudden they exceed your expectations, and then you think you're that much more impressed by them. Or if you hear about someone, you're like, I'm not going to like this person, or you look at them and you're like, they're probably this. You talk to them, you get to know them. They make you feel like you're worse than them, and then you kind of love them almost. You're like, whoa, this is amazing. This guy, like, not only did they made me realize that I was a piece of crap by prejudging them, but now they've actually, like, comparatively, like, in our lives, what they've accomplished to me and who they are, like, I am a piece of crap. So it's little things like that where, like, it's fascinating to me how we're like, if we have low expectations and someone exceeds them, all of a sudden you're that much more impressed. Like, you're far more impressed than you would have been if they had just been that person without your expectations. Right. Oh, so what were you going to say, man? I'm sorry, because I had this idea, like, we were talking about the Limp Bizkit, and I was like, I think we could really just put a circle around that and move on, but I'm like, I got lost in the weeds. I can't not get lost in the weeds, that's why. Man, I want to.
It's why the title is so appropriate.
Yeah, that's why I want to talk to you about it because we were talking about World War II and stuff. Remember how you were like, oh, I'm watching this documentary, and
yeah.
5 years ago, I went through this huge thing where I watched that documentary. I've watched almost every decent World War II documentary that's come out. I really got into World War One. There was one that was like a 6-part series on World War One. I think it was either that or it was Dan Carlin's podcast. I think it might have been Dan Carlin's podcast, man. But like it made me realize that World War One is just the most horrific thing that has ever happened to the human race. I think it is far worse than World War II. It is the worst war that has ever happened, I think. 100%. Like that we have in modern history. I mean, I don't know what happened with the Mongols. I'm sure that was terrible.
Right.
But just...
Sorry.
I'm just saying, man, like just the tales of like the foxholes, and these guys are sitting there for like 8 months, and there's dead bodies all around them, and they have lice, and their feet are rotting off their bodies, and they're just shaking, and they have shell shock, and it's just they're nothing. They become nothing. They don't even have the strength to. Oh, Chris, and all for men who are like, hey, just throw another 50,000 at him because I don't have to fight, and this is the way it worked, like 50 years ago when I was fighting, and they didn't learn. They just kept throwing them, and. Oh, Chris!
Well, it's interesting just because even in that World War II documentary, because there's 2 really good ones on Netflix, and what I really appreciate about them, is both World War II in color and
great documentary,
World War II's greatest moments in color. What I really appreciate about them is I would call them a true documentary because it points out they don't choose a side. It's not like, hey, America came in and they were great, especially in the greatest moments stuff, because they point out, I can't remember the name of the place, but one of the battles where it was like the civilian town got royally screwed. And now it definitely focused on all the horrors the Nazis and the Japanese armies did, but it didn't sugarcoat some of the bad stuff that the Allies had done. And I really appreciated that. Just because I'm like, look, if I want to hear an opinion piece, I can search that out. But with world history, I'd love as unbiased as possible. Just because part of it is like some of the stuff is so horrific where you're just like, how the heck could Germany get on board with what they were doing? But then as you're listening to these documentaries, you really see not like, oh, I get to that conclusion too. But you can see how someone like Hitler could get into power. You can see how people could be willfully ignorant of the stuff that the Nazi armies were doing. And you could also see how Germany got like royally boned at the end of World War I, and how that created it would be one of the, if not the major catalyst, like one of the biggest ones for you're setting it up. You're setting up the eventual Second War with the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think the thing
in retrospect now, and that's where I'm like, oh my gosh, like we talked about this in school, but we did not go into this enough, and this is so interesting.
I really, I like those documentaries because like not only does the color sort of give you like it's more real, like you're in there, you actually think, oh, okay, like how would I feel if I was in the situation? What would it be like to live in that, right? And I think that sort of thing where when you first said that, I was like, okay, so you have this culture who. Talk about hubris, dude. Decides they're going to take over the world because they deserve to.
Listener, right? Christian's got a tattoo, hubris. just so we're clear.
And that's what they should have done. Just tattooed that on all the Germans' arms, all the Nazi arms, right? It's like, there you go. You give tattoos, you get tattoos. It's oh, you like giving tattoos, do you?
Oh, sir.
Is this getting too... Okay, sorry. But no, you have this society, this culture of all this hubris, and then you go and you say, hey, you guys, basically they were punished for their hubris, right? Like they got defeated, they were punished. I think the mistake... no, I don't know what I'm saying. Because you would look at it and you say, oh, okay, they did this, they punished them, they didn't learn, they came back twice as hard, right? And then you think, okay, well, were they punished afterwards? No, they were split up, right? They were split up. The Russians got one side, the Allies got the other. As far as I know, West Germany didn't have to pay reparations anymore. I don't think they were under the same sort of conditions Germany was in the first place. But it's interesting. I wonder if they had been left whole again, and then just here, you're still going to have to pay this. Like the Treaty of Versailles is still in place. You guys are still being, cut down, chopped down at the knees, sort of thing. I wonder if they would have risen up again. Like at what point do you say, hey, this culture needs to be wiped off the face of the earth? Because clearly they're not getting the message, right?
Well, it's I like part of me thinks would they have? I don't know, because the atomic bomb changed. Like that changed everything. Because suddenly it's like, oh, whoa, let's get our hands on that. And Germany might have been like, there's no way we can get that. So they might have been like, all right, we're not starting stuff. But like if that treaty had happened again, where it's like we're back to square one, I would have been like, we've learned nothing. Mm-hmm. And this is like, we're setting this up again. Yeah. Like it fostered, like, yeah, they're like a punishment, but also there were people being punished as part of the country that didn't. It's complex.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They didn't directly do
it. They didn't participate, but they had to deal with it anyway. They had to deal with the ramifications, right? Because that's sort of what it is when you're a society, when you're a country. America.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, dude, no, and it made me wonder. I'm like, they kind of did obliterate the culture after World War II. It's almost like they did say, hey, we're not, like, I'm not entirely sure what happened if Stalin was like, oh, we're taking the East, or if it was like a thing between the Allies and Russia where they're like, hey, we're just going to split it. You guys take everything east to there. We'll take what's west, right? But if that was an agreement, then that is effectively saying this culture can't be allowed to continue because last time it did this again, right? So,
but they did it differently this time around, where it still might be like, look, it's Germany and East Germany or West Germany, but it's not like, hey, there's no military and there's no funds for your country and you're paying everybody. Like, they really got, that country really got put on. So then now, like, as I've been watching these documentaries, I'm like, because it's the first episodes or so that really do the setup work, where I'm like, yeah, how could anybody be surprised that this happened?
Yeah, it's
that retrospect where you're like, if any other country does this antagonistic thing, like, of course you want there to be justice or whatever. Yeah. But at the same point, you're like, look, you need to do something here where it's not going, like, you might have done something in response. You could have been defending, but look, it's war. There's going to be absolute mistakes and horrific things on both sides. And if you don't think so, then I'd say you're kidding yourself. So at the end of a war, it does take two to tango. At some point, yes, you're going to defend yourself. You're absolutely going to defend yourself. Yeah. But then how hard and how far you go, that is like, that's something you're going to have to deal with later. And then also, like, look at what the punishment or whatever the outcome's going to be. Because if the outcome is going to be like, this is 1,000% beneficial for me and completely pins everything on this person, like, you're just stapling and setting up another uprising.
Yeah, I think,
or another war.
I think
and now we're in a position where it's just mass death.
I think,
less horrifically. But
I think in terms of Germany, like, obviously there need to be repercussions for their actions, right? Like, something needed to happen. And in lieu of saying, hey, we're going to dismantle your culture and your society, and we're going to make you into like 5 or 6 different countries, and that's it. You no longer have a national identity. You no longer are German. You no longer are any of these things, right? And it's like, they could have done that, but they didn't. They're like, okay, you get to keep your national identity. You get to still be a country. You get to be German, but you're going to have to, do A, B, and C. And I think the issue was where the Allies messed up was not making it a dynamic sort of scale upon which to make reparations, right? Because eventually got to a point where the Germany was being crippled as a nation, right? It wasn't being allowed to progress. It was in debt, like it was being destroyed, right? It was being destroyed by its reparations that it had to make. So, I mean, it not only from like just from a pragmatic standpoint, they should have made the rules more lax on a dynamic scale, like along a time, because that they wouldn't, like, just, again, pragmatically, not to be like, okay, you deserve a little bit of mercy as time goes by, but just to be like, oh, okay, if we don't do this, they're going to rise up again, and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, you can make the argument that, like, they never expected them to, and even when they did start to rearm themselves and all that stuff, it was completely legal, although nobody did anything because everyone was still reeling from World War One.
Oh, exactly. It's like you can see how the stuff happened. Where like I'll still say, like, in my opinion, and I'm not the most educated on this.
The Nazis were right. I know what you think, Chris. You don't even have to say it. Let's just move on. You know, we all know.
No, it's just like, yeah, as you pointed out, like, the U.S. I think was even helping a bit, but then they got hit with the Great Depression. They're like, nope, screw you, you're on your own. Yeah. And then there was the documentaries even say, like, there was a perfect storm of things happening that led to World War II. But I do think that a huge if you take out the strictness, or tone back the strictness of the Treaty of Versailles, then it would have been much less of that perfect storm. Like, there might have been a couple more dams in the way before the flood just hit, so to speak. Yeah. Like, because one thing I love about the documentaries is they do point out, like, it's not, Hitler didn't come out with his crazy Hitler stuff right away, but that also wasn't hidden, because Mein Kampf, which is horrifying, he wrote before he was in charge. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, he knew how to dial it down, but it's still like, you could see the pieces there. It was just people like throw so much crap at the German people. It's like, well, they voted him in and he was this obvious monster. It's like, well, yeah, but look at the crappy, like, the terrible, terrible time that had just been inflicted upon them. And then here's this person where he's doing enough where it's like, yeah, there's these crazy stuff, but there's also this good stuff talking about us being restored. That's going to appeal. Yeah. And it's where you can be willfully ignorant of some terrible things of your elected official.
Here's the thing.
Just because
we were talking about, like, those human biases, right? The things you got to watch out for. You're like, I'm a human being, so I know that A, B, and C are always true about me, no matter where I grew up, where I was born, who my parents were, what country, anything. These are true about me because I'm a living, breathing human being. One of those things is that sort of that pride, right? Where they're like that pride of, like, my country, my nationalism, identity, team, tribe, group, all that stuff. And so I think that was especially, like, the Germans seemed especially affected by that. But I think the thing that we really got to remember is, you know, it was the 30s. There was no internet. I mean, look at people now. Oh, yeah. We have internet and TV, and they elected Trump and believe him still. There's people out there who still support him. So it's so if you look at that in this day and age, how could you not understand how all those, like, you know how many, most of those people didn't live in cities. Do you know how many cities? There weren't many cities, dude, especially after World War One. Like, all these people were living in, like, nowhere. No, I bet none of them read the paper. There was, like, maybe radio news. I think there's radio news, but there, you know, paper, radio news. So it's like, imagine how many people don't read the paper now, and to think about back then, and then think about how uneducated they must have been compared to us just in general, you know. I mean, well, even with the internet, dude. Like, if you only grew up with the internet, and, like, maybe, like, a 6th grade education nowadays, which would probably be like a full education back then, or something. I don't know. Maybe it's worse now. I really don't know. But I just feel like it is. But it's so easy to understand how they would just be like, oh, this is my father felt this way. I don't read the paper. My life sucks. This guy's telling me it's everybody else's fault. That sounds good. I'm a human being. I'm breathing. So, of course, I'm inclined. I want to believe that none of this is my fault. You know, so it's...
Well, especially when you get to the stuff where it's like, as there's the rise in power, then there's an absolute agenda and absolute coercion of, this is what I want to tell you. So that then as you're hearing that, it's like when you look into stories about, or podcasts, and you hear about some of the experiences of people in, say, North Korea, where it's like, all of us outside are like, how can you think this? Yeah. But then as you hear just how ingrained, like, there was a podcast where it's just a sidestep to prove the point, though. Like, back in the 90s, WCW, who did they were a wrestling company. They did stuff with the Japanese wrestling company called New Japan. The guy who one of the guys who ran New Japan at the time, he was putting on a festival, a sports festival or whatever in North Korea. And then some of the WCW people went with them. And for them, they were like, look, this shows how international we are. But then it's also like the controversy gets more eyes on your product, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But then when they're sharing their stories about being in North Korea, they're like, you had no idea how people could. When you hear stories about North Korea after being outside of it, you're like, how can people, like, how can they think any of this? Like, they must, whatever. But he's like, inside, it's so different.
Yeah.
Like, they're coming off the plane, they're being separated, they're being grilled, all their personal stuff is being taken away. Like, whenever they are together, someone from the government was officially with them. When they are giving statements, it's like, you are reading this statement, and it's about how great the magnificent leader is.
Yeah.
Like, and we are filming you, and it's very obvious, if you're not doing this, like, we might throw you in a cell and you're never coming out. So then the very doctored stuff that gets shown is even from people flying in talking about how great that leader and how everything is in comparison. So then it's just interesting when you look at something like World War II with Japan, because some of that stuff happened there, but also with Germany and other countries, just how much suppression gets in that, where it's like so many German people didn't know about even though some of it was clearly obvious, some of it, even the German people didn't even know about how horrific the Jews and others were being treated through the Holocaust.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them knew, but not all of them knew.
No, because it's not like they put that stuff up in the papers or anything, right?
Exactly. But it's just interesting, just as people now talk, like, how could anybody think that? And how it's like, it's understandable. And that's something I really appreciated about those two documentaries, just how they weren't trying to be like, oh, hey, these people good, these people bad. Yes, they showed like these people and their actions substantially worse.
Yeah.
And it did show like the British Army doing good. And I'm not saying it painted anybody in the light, because historically I don't think you could equate the British Army in World War II at the level of the German army or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or the Japanese army. Like, it's just showing the actions and letting you judge for yourself. Yeah. And I really appreciated that. Well, it was a documentary series I started about the Vietnam War, but then as I've been reading into it, it's like that one, the Vietnam War is such a controversial topic that it was just this documentarian, I can't remember who it was. There's stuff where like people who like historians have been like, they deliberately didn't include this part because this part undoes the narrative of what this was pushing. Yeah. And that's where it's like, I hate the narratives. Yeah. If I want to read your opinion, I'm absolutely open to reading your opinion. But in the case of a documentary, just tell me what happened. Like, don't give me your spin. And that's why I don't like Michael Moore films. Because those are borderline propaganda.
What? Yeah, it's true. It's funny. I've been thinking about that lately too, because we've gone to this, and it sort of goes back to like, how could people think this? And we were talking about China and stuff like that, and I was sort of thinking like, you know, we have all these combating narratives, or these narratives that are sort of fighting against each other, and recently I've been thinking about, because I've been trying to figure out like how are you like. Because we've gotten to a point where if you believe something, your opinion has become the truth. It's become the fact, right? Like, and I've just been thinking, like, because you were saying that the narrative of the states and the narrative of the narrative of the Allies and the narrative of the Axis, and it's like each has a narrative, but there's clearly a lesser of two evils, right? And I think. It was interesting because I almost got into an argument today with this guy on Reddit where he was like, yeah, have you seen that picture of all those white trash idiots protesting in their pickups and stuff, and then like they're blocking off the hospital entrance and stuff like that in the States, and then there's nurses that have made a line so that they can't cross it. Yeah. And one person was saying, oh, are these nurses, like, do you know if they're actually nurses? Are they paid people to do this? Is this whole thing? Because, you know, a lot of stuff has come to light in the past few days where all of these protests, all these right-wing protests, they've all been linked back to one single person who, in a single day, made all these groups and who, in a single day, made all these events. and or not a person, but an entity, right? A lot of people are like, it's big news now. So someone was saying, oh, maybe the counter protest with the nurses has been orchestrated in the same manner, and I'm thinking, okay, but I don't even care because I agree with those nurses. And it gets to a point where it's like we're sort of in the world today where it's like you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to you're not allowed to choose which narrative you want. You're like, where I'm like, even if these nurses are paid actors and they're not actual nurses, they're right. And it really starts to make me think where I'm like, I don't even want to participate in any of this anymore because you can't be right anymore. There's no reasonable standard. There's no standard of reasonableness. And it gets me back to, and I think that's sort of the point, right? Where these astroturfing campaigns and stuff like that, even in the last election, there were events put on, like, a pro-Muslim rally will be set up across the street from a pro-gun rally, and they're both done by Russian propagandists, right? And the whole idea is to get people to think that there are people out there who believe things that they don't, and that they want to take stuff away from you, and then like get them to fight against each other, right? And oh crap. What was I thinking? Oh yeah. So it's the narratives. Which narrative is right? Because I think there's always going to be a narrative, right? And it's like I'm just trying to figure out, like, obviously the Allied narrative is the right one. I mean, how can you argue against it, even if they're lying to make themselves look better? It's like, yeah, but they weren't burning, they weren't cremating Jewish people against their will, dude. Like, let them tell the lies they want.
Exactly.
But I just want to say one thing. I want to, with China, like we were talking about how can Germans believe this or how can North Koreans believe this? China is the most fascinating example of that. There's instances online where people have gotten into fights with Chinese nationals, and the Chinese nationals will crap on their government, and they're saying, yes, our government does do that. We hate it. We don't want our government to do that anymore. And you know what? Your government does this, this, and this, and we hate that. We don't want them to do it. And the Chinese people are like, they can't fathom that someone would be like, wait. We just insulted your government, and you're agreeing with us? That's not a burn to you? And they're like, no, you idiot, because we have free speech. Because our government isn't God. Like, our government isn't, like, it's just, they're working for us, and they're not doing a good job, and we're mad. And it's, and the Chinese, and that's the Chinese, like, oh, that's their culture, man. I'm not saying it's a racial thing, I'm saying it's their culture. They cheat to get ahead, literally. Like, no one, there's so many online gaming competitions and organizations that won't allow Chinese players to play because they like, to them, if you don't cheat, you're an idiot. Like, literally everybody's cheating. Like, it's like if you don't take the avenue that's provided to you to get ahead, then you're dumb and you don't deserve to succeed. And you can see that in the way they deal with us, and the way they take advantage of our real estate laws, and the way they take advantage of the biggest thing is the copyright laws all around the world. They're huge and notorious. So you're not going to find anyone who will disagree with the fact that China is built a large part of their economy on other countries' innovations, right? It's it's fascinating to me that these people, I don't know, dude. It's scary. It's fascinating and it's terrifying that China exists, and that these people they don't understand and they don't care. They're happy to be, and it's sort of what I think when I watch these conservatives, these I don't know who call them conservatives or right wings anymore. They just these nut jobs, right? Who are protesting the quarantine order, and it's funny because a lot of these people, I would imagine, they talk about they probably use that nomenclature and stuff like that, and it's like, you're getting by corporations and big business and Russian trolls and right wing think tanks and stuff like that. Like, you're, Chris, I don't know what I'm saying anymore, dude. I don't like talking about this stuff. I don't want to participate in the world because I can't organize it properly in my head. I can't do it. It sucks, dude. It's like all this stuff is flooding in. I'm like, it's all connected. Like, it's all connected, and I can't do it. And I don't. And then I think, why do I care? Why am I participating in this?
So, just because the way you ended that train of thought, it reminded me of this great meme where it was someone pointing out all the flaws of, like, the trying to follow the logic of the the Terminator timelines as the sequels have kept coming, and then the final one was like pointing to stuff that was in different franchises. Like, wait, where's old Biff? How did this? Just it just reminded me of that. All right, so I have a random but serious question for you, sir.
Oh, good.
What did you think of Weezer's Teal album?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked it.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Like
I didn't enjoy their Black album, but I enjoyed their Teal album a lot.
What happened on the Black album? What was that about?
It was kind of like electropop a bit, or a little bit more of that flavor. It's so funny with like Weezer. We've talked, and man, I've realized how much I miss talking music with people, because music used to be such like, especially when we're younger, like music is like, that's my identity. What I listen to is who I am, and all that stupid crap.
Politics is the new music.
Politics is the new music. Oh my gosh! But we're making that a shirt. Like we're making that a shirt. But yeah, it was so just with Weezer. Like I genuinely love that band. I've only grown to appreciate them so much more. One of the things I like really love about them is I feel like maybe they're getting to the point now where they've always done it, but there's always been like this at times half apology for it. But they do what they want, right? They can. That's the thing. That's the kind of band that can do whatever the heck they want, and I think they should just embrace that. Like we got I can't remember the name of the album, but it had the song "Back to the Shack," where it was like Weezer's comeback album, and then their following album that had California Girls or whatever it was on it was hailed as more like a return to classic Weezer. And there was like this in the lyrics, it's like, hey, I forgot that disco sucked and all that, where I'm just like, Rivers, I get that you're like, the fans have been bashing you on the like on the sound and all that just because you've gone in a different way, but also just do whatever the heck you want, because there's so much fun to be had with that. Because when Weezer does just whatever the heck they want, like the Teal album, you get Happy Together, which I'm like, that was the cover I didn't know I needed. Weezer doing Happy Together just makes sense. Like, it's perfect.
It did a really good job. I watched this thing with him, and I'm sort of jealous of his setup and the freedom with which he has to make music. But it's really interesting because he just has this system, right? Where he's got a room, it's like his own studio. He can record anything he wants at any time. You just walk in there and write a song and it's going to sound great. And no one can hear it. It's just, and the dedication he seems to have to getting better, becoming a better singer, becoming a better guitarist, a better songwriter, to exploring his craft, no matter if it's one of those three, right? This craft of being a musical performer, an artist. And I just really appreciate it. And I really think that it took a lot of I think the Teal album was for them, man. It's for him. It was just an endeavor. It was like it was a band who's done extremely well, and they're just like, we just want to explore what we can do, what we want to do, what we feel like doing. And I don't think they're making music for anyone but Weezer now. And that's fine, man.
Well, and that's the thing where I get that you, like, I'm not an artist, but I do get wanting to do stuff that your fans or your audience will enjoy. But then at the same point, I like the idea of, if, like, they're there, like, dude, just within reason. And I say within reason because you don't want to do anything that's like, well, we're going to do an album where it's just all really offensive stuff. Maybe don't do that. But, like, just do whatever you want. And, you like, the thing is with fan culture, you get so into stuff where it's like, well, it's not this, and so it sucks, and if you think this Weezer song is good, then you're the worst kind of fan or whatever. Where it's just kind of like, really, like like Pinkerton is a great album, but it's also one where I understand why that one is hard. It can be hard to recommend to people just because I'm like, I respect it, the artistry on it is admirable and awesome, but at the same point, like, dude, you didn't need to reveal half the stuff in the songs that you did. Like, bravo for doing it, but at the same time, I didn't need to know that. Nobody needed to know that. Like, so that
Well, I don't. What does he say in Pinkerton? Like, what is he talking about?
Some of the stuff is there's the Pink Triangle song. There's another another couple where some of the lyrics seem to get very autobiographical, where you're just kind of like kudos to you for doing it. It came out great. It's just I don't think I needed to know that.
Yeah. But like as an artist, like if you were to make that decision, why do you think you would have made it? No. I'm just curious. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong to think that, dude. I'm just saying, like, if imagine what you would have to be doing to make that decision, like, you know.
Oh right, yeah. Oh yeah, no, and I don't fault them for doing it. It's just like the thing is though, ever since Pinkerton came out, that's been the thing that people compare everything against. Where it's like,
no,
like,
dude.
Look at
I mean, literally.
Oh, sorry.
Literally, tell me. What you would I want you to tell me. I want you to literally tell me. Yeah, like why if you had made that decision, why do you think you would have made that decision if you had made it?
I don't know. I guess such a satisfactory answer, right? No. Okay. So like the thing is I don't know if I would have made that decision. That's the thing. Like I don't there's some stuff where I'd just be like, I don't need to say this. Like, this person doesn't need to know. Like, I don't need to do this. So that's where that would be. So where it's like So there might be times where I might have conversations with people. Sorry.
No, I think there was a thing where we're both stopping, but it's also sort of laggy, so we're both starting again, and we're not really.
But, the audio's cutting in and out. Like you were laughing, and then I'm seeing this, and then I'm getting the laughter.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, dude, because I just want to. I was thinking because I was like, you know, over the past year or so, I've been able to put myself in positions where I think like I would never do heroin, or I would never go and do meth or something. I've been really trying to think like what kind of person that I would have to be, like where would I have to be in my life, how intelligent would I have to be, like I'm just trying to like I'm really and I get like I guess feelings and stuff where I can relate it to times in my life where I've been close to that, and I'm thinking and I can think. I just get like a feeling like a darkness or something. And I'm just like, whoa, that's way too real. That's way too raw. I'm so glad I was never put in a position where that was a decision I was going to make, right? And so I think like music is kind of if you can do it like that, you could probably do it with music, right? Where you can say like, oh, okay, if I were to, so I guess, but at the same time, I guess, dude, if you were going to say like, it would have to be something so specific to his life, like what motivated him? Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I think they've even said they were going through an interesting time where it's curious because with music, it seems like people, of course, they're hoping to share their art, their creation with as many people as possible. So it's like, you like you like seeing it grow, you like seeing it catch on, but then there is the catch-22 of suddenly like I've got a lot more attention on me and I wasn't ready for that, or I've got now a lot of expectation placed on me and I wasn't ready for that, or I'm not that person, or I didn't want that. I just wanted this part of it. So I think they were in a rough place at that time, and sometimes you can and that can create great art and great music. Like Pinkerton is a fantastic album. I'm not knocking it at all, but it's also one where I'm like, if someone's like, "What's great Weezer?" I'm like, okay, this is the deeper cut because this is the you've got El Scorcho, which is fine, but then you've got across the ocean. Ever. Like then you've got stuff like Across the Ocean or Pink Triangle or whatever it is that are solid songs, but you're like, okay, this one's a little bit more real, and someone's like burying their soul in that. Unless you've had this relationship with this person, it's this stranger doing it. The program froze.
What? Oh, what's happening?
I'm going to pause. All right. So sorry about those technical difficulties. All right. So yeah, I think you're right. Like Rivers is an interesting cat.
Oh, I want to say, okay. So before when we were talking in the in-between, because we did just get cut off, right? Are we going to mention that? Is that going to be, okay. Yeah. Because it happened abruptly. So, Chris left the call for no reason whatsoever, and he won't tell me why. And
oh yeah, that's what happened. Christian has a thing of, as soon as I can make Chris look bad, I'm going to do it, and then I'll apologize promptly after.
He said something about Israel and Palestine, and he just signed right off. And I was like, whoa, what was that about? Throw in stuff like that. It's just something about the Uyghurs and they deserved it. I don't know. It was weird.
Just stop. I can see the wheels turning, and it's gonna get worse.
Yeah, we can cut out all this.
Let's just cut this off now.
No, but you were. So one thing that was fascinating to me, I heard this story a long time ago when Rivers was talking about how when he was writing Pinkerton, right? And when we were talking before everything cut out, I didn't realize that he was talking about Pinkerton when this happened. But so what he did was he got obsessed with the fact that one of his legs was shorter than the other, even though I doubt it was. I don't even think that's actually a thing unless it's like dramatically shorter, like an inch or two. But it wasn't even that. I think it was like less than an inch. So he went to the doctors, and they're like, "We can't do anything for you unless, of course, you want to break your legs and then reset them." And he was like, "That's what I want to do." So that's what he did. He had his legs broken and reset so that they would be at even lengths. And he spent the whole time while he was getting better in incredible pain, writing Pinkerton. And I think that probably has a lot to do with his, when you're sitting there. Yeah, if you're mentally ill enough to be like, yes, break my legs so that they'll be the same length, even though they're not functionally the same length. Functionally, maybe not actually. And then you're left there in your house alone. You're not touring anymore. You're not recording. You're just sitting there with your broken legs. How crazy you must have been to do that in the first place. Yeah, I think you're going to write some introspective stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, now it's just, when you're in those places, how it can lead to some good art. Now, I don't think you were ever a fan of this band.
Yes.
But I was for a while a fan of the band Finger 11, the Canadian. For a while they were known as like the other Canadian alt-rock band, because the big Canadian alternative band was Our Lady Peace, who I only got into in my later years. Like some of their stuff is really, really good. But Finger 11, they had done I can't remember the name of their first album, but then like it had the song Above on it. They had a couple big songs, so they were gaining some Canadian traction and all that. But then they got dropped by their record label, and then they got royally screwed on some royalties. They got dropped. So they were in this really, really angry place. And then they did their Grayest to Blue Skies album, which is just, to me, it's still good. It's also just such that album has an atmosphere. Like, it is a depressed, pissed off album. Like, that comes across in the guitar work. It comes across in how a number of the songs are sung. There's some lighter pieces on it, but but to me, I'm like, that was that band at their apex. They did some other stuff where it's like, oh yeah, it's catchy, it's this, it's whatever. It's not for me, and other people can enjoy it and right on. But I'm like, they could not recreate that album because that experience directly informed that album. So it's just really interesting how you can like get that art from those bad places. But I can recommend Grayest to Blue Skies a lot easier than, again, Pinkerton. Just not that Pinkerton's bad. It's amazing. But like I said earlier, it's got some deeper cut stuff where you're like, hey, this might be stuff I might share one-to-one with a friend who I've had this relationship with for ages, instead of, hey, everybody, here's my deepest thought, where it's like, whoa, dude, I was just asking what you thought of the fries.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so... Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think maybe we could leave it there, because I'm thinking, because now I started to think like, man, that's the point of art, right? Like that's the point.
No, and that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, yeah, and I think the thing, the crux that we're sort of resting on here is marketability or viability in the market, balancing that with getting, I guess, too much in your own head, or wanting to make too much of your own stuff. Like, I guess, but that's really a decision they have to make themselves, right? Like, do you,
Right.
yeah. And I think Weezer's making the decision where, they got the fame based on writing songs that they liked. I assume they wanted to be famous. I assume they wanted other people to like their songs. But I think as you get older, and other people's opinions start to mean less to you, and you don't seek validation from the outside world, you sort of start to cultivate it within yourself. I think that's what we're seeing with him, right? And I think other people, some people might say, hey, it doesn't seem like he's maturing. It seems like, if anything, he's regressing. But maybe for him that is maturing. Maybe for him he had too much pressure on himself. Maybe for him letting go and doing what is fun is a growth. Maybe that is progressing.
Well, we talked about this before we started recording an episode or two ago, where with, like, say, Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin's the producer.
He produced,
and I know
the Red album.
Sorry, yeah. I know that's a sticking point for you, and that's fair.
Oh, you want to get into it? Wait, what? How?
Oh, no.
I know you don't want to get into it because I know you want. That's the one thing you want to avoid, Chris. But I want to know. What do you? You tell me to my face. What? Like what? What do you think I think? Like, what do you think? Like, oh wait, no, you know my opinion about Rick Rubin, don't you?
Yeah, because we've talked about this, just not on this.
What is my opinion about Rick Rubin, Chris? Please.
I believe the short version of it is you find he gets a lot of credit when he might not necessarily do a lot of the actual production side of the producing.
No.
Am I off base?
No, not at all. I think, like, he because I think there is this, like, this sort of, like, Zen art to being a good producer or mixer where, like, there are times when it is more about not doing anything than it is doing something. But almost every time I've seen him just laying on a couch like, and it's like, you're not behind a desk. You're just, he gets the most successful artist in the world to work with them in the most expensive studios ever with the best gear and the best people, and he just sits there and does nothing and gets amazing credit for it. Like, when you listen to, like, everything he does is so lazy too. It's like, he'll, like, the latest Strokes album, he worked on that, and there's little things where it's like, there's no crash going into the second chorus of the adults are talking. There's little things missing, there's little things added in that make it seem a little more crafty, a little more indie, and it's like, so just because he's too damn lazy, all of a sudden it's cool, Like, all of a sudden he's this original producer. It's like, oh, that doesn't sound like, it doesn't sound professionally mixed. The guy's a genius. Like, everything's compressed to the point where it's just about to distort. The man's a genius. I don't. Like, I'm certain he does stuff. Like, I'm certain, like, for everything that we don't see him doing, everything you can say, like, oh, he didn't have a hand in this. He's probably, there's probably things he does do. Or even if he gives the band members a way of getting out of their own way, Even just that, even as just, like, a psychological manager of people. I mean, obviously he keeps getting work, but I think he might be overrated.
well, we had the conversation that I think ties it back to Weezer, is that, like, what I think he does, just because you said, like, maybe the growth is going back, and I'm like, I think what Rubin is most known for, and to me, where I give him the most credit, because I don't know as much of the production side, is where he said is he helps people refine where they were, like going back to the well. But then going back to the well doesn't mean, like, oh, I'm back to being 13. It's, where was I? And then bringing the knowledge and experience you have now to that place, and then applying that to your art, to your craft. So that's where I like a guy like him. So, like, you saw how it worked with Johnny Cash, like the American albums that were his comeback albums. Like, that was Rubin basically being like, look, we're just sitting and we're recording. And then Cash, like, without the pressure of, like, oh, I've got to do this because this was successful. Or in the case of Metallica with the Death Magnetic album, where every album from the Black Album onwards was produced by Bob Rock, and he was very hands-on, and he was helpful to the band. But then it also is like, all right, what's the goal of where this? They're like, it's like, look, the goal here is just you guys being you guys, just going back to, like, figuring out who you were again, but like taking who you are now, applying it to who you were then. So that's where I think you can revisit your earlier stuff and still have it be growth, because it's that melding, right?
That there's, there are more than one instance wherein he's been credited with doing that, with taking someone who's gotten lost in themselves or who has lost themselves and sort of bringing them back to what made them or great or special in the first place, right? And I guess he's unique in that sense, because a lot of producers or sound engineers, they don't, I guess they're more, because when you think of what a producer does, and then you listen to like what he's done with the bands, and you listen to their other stuff, and you're like, how is this different from their other stuff? Like a lot of his most recent collaborations, I've listened to it, and I'm like, it doesn't seem like he helped these people at all. It really doesn't. It seems like they were like, we're going to do this new thing, and we're not confident about it, so we're going to get this big name to come in and sort of be like, hey, like if we made these decisions, the genius producer was where you're working with us. If he, you could say he's the one who made those decisions, and if he's the one who made them, then clearly they got to be good, and I'm the one who's an idiot for not getting it, right? And I think it gives them a sort of a license to actually not put out their best, right, to not question themselves, to not, I think there's this aspect of that. So, I mean, I wasn't there. I'm not a mind reader. I wasn't a fly on the wall. I don't understand. I do think, he gets a lot of credit, and then I'm like, oh, I'm excited to hear the album from this band I like that he worked on, and then I hear the album, and I'm like, oh, it was just as bad as their last album. Or something, it's like, there was no growth here. Like, they just changed, they sidestepped into another puddle of crap. It was just a different color or something, So, yeah, I feel like he is sort of overrated. But, I mean, honestly, out of anyone, I would love to work with him. I'd be like, this would be amazing.
Okay, so I was also going to say, just because we're getting close to that time where I was like, hey, we're going to wrap it this time, but now we're going to bump to 15 minutes. Earlier when we were talking music, as we were into those weeds, I mentioned Rage Against the Machine. That is a tremendous band. I remember in the early 2000s, when American Idiot dropped and Bush was the president, so at times suddenly it was very, very fashionable and everybody was political. I'm just like, man, if you want to listen to like good political music, like beyond like I Don't Like You, like critical, interesting political music, Rage Against the Machine is outstanding. Yes. And like they're still playing live. I'm just like I would love another album from them. They're not in the place I think where they feel they can, but I would love. I would eat that up in a heartbeat.
No, and dude, ever since Trump was elected, I was saying like we need Rage. Rage needs to come back. We need Rage. We need Rage now more than we did before, right? Because it's like, dude, I don't know. I think a lot of our generation, we were like, we were attracted that in our teens, that was when the internet was starting to get big and we could actually research stuff. And in our teens, you have that thing where you're becoming rebellious towards the norms or the stories you've been told or the truths that you think are, that society has told you. So you start to research this stuff. You're like, I want the real story. I don't want the history lesson that we get taught in school. And you start to learn all this stuff about how the States and Canada and how they do these terrible, awful things and they're hypocrites. And you start saying, then you're like, oh, this is a part of my identity. So I think it's interesting because Rage came up in a time where the generation before us, like Generation Xers, they didn't have the internet. They couldn't. They got they got certain books and stuff like that. They did know certain things, but all of a sudden, our generation has all of this info, and now all of a sudden, and I think that's where it sort of relates to the American Idiot thing, where it's like everyone. Now between the internet, between all the info that you have, and also your ability to say, hey, this is my identity, and present it to the world, like internationally, to the whole world, like the internet, like all of a sudden you have these everyone's sort of playing that game of like, they're using that sort of left-wing rebel ideology as like their identity, right? Where it's like now it's like it's being fed to you by like the Burger King of music, Green Day, or something like that, right? Or,
that was the thing. It was like. Sorry.
Oh! I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, dude. The one thing about Rage, I'm really sorry. The one thing, I was like, oh, we need Rage so badly, we need them to come back, and to find out that they're still playing shows, but they're not releasing any albums, is to me a complete and utter abdication of any responsibility they may have, right? Like, obviously, you can't say they're responsible for anything. They're just a band. They're just making music. But at the same time, it's like, dude, if everything you said before, everything you say means nothing if you're willing to go and tour and make a million, like, you know, however much money they're going to make off of touring, but not release a new album. That doesn't make any sense. Like, you're resting on the like, everything you said back then is bullshit because you're resting on its laurels now, and you're not making anything new. You're not contributing to the cause. You're just, Chris.
All right, so
what were you going to say, man?
The first part was like,
I'm sorry.
I don't think it was. I'm not trying to say it's Green Day's intent, or anything like that. But to me, in the 2000s, you can absolutely call out politics, but it became, in cycles, it becomes quite fashionable to do so, right? Like, suddenly everything and everybody's political. It's like, now's the time, and it's easy. To me, it's easy and it's lazy when it's like, well, I do it when everybody else is doing it. It's like, well, yeah, because you're seeing success, and there's nothing to fear. So you, as a band or someone who normally is like, I'm against trends, and I'll call out people for selling out. You're doing the exact same thing right now. It could be your genuine opinion, but if this is the only time you're expressing it, this isn't brave. This isn't like breaking new ground. You're just going with the flow. Like, pointing back to Rage, who in the 90s were critical of the Bush and the Clinton administrations. Like, being fully critical of the Clinton administrations, at least in art and music, wasn't necessarily fashionable. And they were being critical of the Bush administration at that time. Also, for the most part,
they weren't just critical of the administrations; they were critical of America as an imperialist entity, right? Just the history of imperialism and lies and just the hypocrisy, like that was what they were all about. They're like, you know, and they're like I feel like when I first learned about, like, when I, like, it was years ago when I first learned about Bernie, I was really getting into the history of America and what it could have been, what it was supposed to be, right? Like, what the apparent ideals that were expressed at its founding meant. And I was like, oh, so the America that we have is a joke. It's a lie, right? And I think that's what the thing, where with Rage, where it's like, they know what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And it's supposed to be what we're told it is, but it's not. Right? Like, that's the thing. And wait, what was I going to say?
Sorry, while you're figuring out, I did want to respond. I think the reason that they're not doing new albums though is when they broke up just because they, like, all of them are very, very passionate people, and sometimes that passion made it quite difficult for them to work with each other. So they're like, the playing together is the part that's fine. The creating together is something that got strained, and they were like, they broke up. It was amicable because they're like, we need to do this because we might kill each other. Just, I'd love to know more behind that, but I think that, like, when they started at first it was for a one-off show, and then as they've said, like, we will get to the studio when we feel we can do that, and that's where it's like, I don't think it's a case of laziness. It might just be like, look, we want to still be able to do this, because then they can still contribute with some of their older stuff, where it's like, maybe they're afraid of, like, if we get back in the studio, even if there's this common thing, like, those old tensions will return. I don't quite know, but that's been my understanding. But I just wanted to say, Rage is friggin' outstanding. They're all of them so good. And it's just, as we were talking about that earlier, the only reason I got to them was just because even every once in a while, right now, it's like, hey, there's this thing of revisiting the 90s and nostalgia. And I've seen people being like, I miss rap metal. I was like, look, there was only ever one good rap metal, like actual rap metal. And that was friggin' Rage Against the Machine. When Aerosmith did it with MC and Anthrax did it with Public Enemy, that was a one-off and both were great. But the actual fusion, Rage Against the Machine, they're the only ones that did it well. Like, Linkin Park was what Linkin Park was, and the stuff worked, but I wouldn't call that rap metal. And then they went off and whatever, Linkin Park. But, like...
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Rage is the only one that... You know why? I think Rage is the only one that got it right. Not because I guess there's that anger, that righteous anger there. Not that, like, loser debutante energy. It's more of like our with Rage, it's like that's real stuff, man. It's the stuff we've been lied to. The whole story we were told about America and the West is wrong. Everything is a lie. We're being fleeced. We're sheep. All that stuff. No, it's all very true. It's all very real. It's real before you lived. It'll be real when you die, right? And so none of that self-indulgent BS, emo crap. In regards to their creative battles, I think they should just listen to Morello. Like, he should be able to make any and every decision, and they should just go along with it. Because, I mean, like the bassist, you could find any bassist who can play like him. I'm sure there's 1,000 in the world you could just replace him. Done, gone. Drummer, same thing. De La Rocca, I think he's the only one you can't replace. Him and Tom Morello. But De La Rocca, and I think what's going on with him is that the whole thing in the 90s, everyone had the same sort of, like, the amount of, like, information about the lies that were being told, everyone had that same info, and there wasn't a lot, right? It was like, the narrative was a lot more narrower that you could be attacking. And now, with the internet, and the fact that it's, like, 20 years later, and the world has become even more interconnected, and even more of, like, a gaslighting propagandist show.
That Rage.
I don't think there's a narrative for him to latch onto anymore. I think it's, not only does he not have that sort of drive that he had that a young man has, that a man in his 20s has, everything that he wants to prove and everything that he wants to change, that rage. So I think he's older now. It's just like, he just probably doesn't have the energy or motivation, because now it's twice as hard to figure everything out. There's like 10, 20 times as much information. You're less capable of finding out what's true and what's not. And there's it's really difficult to choose a narrative to really fight it back against power with, because there's so many now, right? So I think that's probably what's going on, because I think deep down they're probably like, okay, if I'm going to put pen to paper and I'm going to say new things, then I gotta, it's got to be as right as he was before.
Right.
So it's a lot easier when you think of it from a human perspective to be like, let's just keep touring. I want to keep doing this, just make some money, but I can't deal with the amount of pressure that's on me as a man or a person to write that, to be sincere, I think that's what's happened, dude. I think they're just tired. They're old. I think that's it. Well, that's a bummer.
They're one who there's a couple bands where I'm like, you know what, I'd be, even though I'm a fan, and I'd always want, like, of course I'm going to be interested in the more, like Hetfield is someone where I'm like, I want a new solo album from you. Like, that's a want.
Wait. Has he ever had a solo album?
No, he's never had one. So we need. Like, I would love a Hetfield solo album. I'd love a new Rage album.
Yeah.
Metallica, as much as I'd love, that's a want, but that's not a. I'm also like, look, you guys have done some, in my opinion, great music, but they could also just tour, because they put on great live shows. Iron Maiden, of course, I want another Iron Maiden album, but at this point, it's like, there's a lot of material, and what's there is amazing, and you guys could also just tour and have the fun of the live shows. But
yeah,
Rage is one where I'm like, I want a new Rage album. And then Hetfield, I'd love a solo album from.
Oh, dude, you know me. I'm not a Metallica fan. I'm not a fan of metal. I am a fan of sincere artists, people who are true artists, who are, like I said, sincere. And I think Hetfield is that. I think he deserves to get the heck away from that drummer. Hetfield deserves to have his own separate identity, his own separate musical identity. Chris, you understand what I'm saying? He doesn't need some sociopath latching onto him for an identity, right? I think he deserves it. I think the fans deserve. I would love to see a solo album from Hetfield. That'd be amazing. I think the thing with Rage, though, I think the problem with Rage, man, is that they that's the problem with them in the first place. They came out the gate. They're like, we have principles. We have an agenda. This is the thing we do. And it's like, you can't, you can't do it. You can't just be like, no, you can't. It's not Metallica, dude. Like nobody expects anything from Metallica, right? They just expect Metallica to play Metallica songs. But from Rage, there's this expectation of speaking truth to power.
Well, it'd be like another good difference or illustration of that difference would be like, I'm expecting, like, I'd love, say, I'd love a new Will Smith album. I'm a Will Smith fan, but that is quite different than like Public Enemy album, because Public Enemy was very similar to Rage. So it's a very different endeavor. And Public Enemy is still going, but you get like the point stands. It's a very different endeavor. While we are talking Hetfield, before we wrap up, with him, the album, like in my mind, like the guy's a metal musician. As much as he loves country and other genres, like I think it would, even though it would still come out like probably metalish, it'd still be just like how he approaches stuff and like how he works songs, even when it's just covers, is interesting. There's the straight up acoustic sets he's done where like he's not the best singer, but he made In My Life by the Beatles work, which for me, I'm like, that's one of my favorite frontmen from one of my favorite bands covering one of like my favorite song from one of my favorite bands. Like I was like, oh my gosh. But then even doing like the Hank Williams song, Don't Outlaw Bit Has Done Got Out of Hand as a thrashy country song. I was like, this is awesome. Like this is just a good thing to do this. And the fact that he did it and made it work, I'm like, give me more of this, man. Just like, I'd love it.
Yeah. So wait, are these from, so he hasn't done a solo album. So wait, how did he record and release? These are just live performances?
So he did an acoustic song, an acoustic set, I think for a benefit. So that was just live. And then in Don't You Think This Outlaw Bit, that it was on a tribute album for Hank Williams, who had just passed, because they got really close. They got close in the 90s. The Load album, which is Load and Reload, are my two least favorite Metallica albums. They got some good stuff. One of the songs on there is a straight up country song just called Mama Said. It's like it's got the twang and everything, man. Like at certain parts, it's an interesting thing. But I'd love a solo album from him, just because when he does stuff, and he's such a good musician. He's so underrated.
Yeah, yeah, dude. No, I mean, I'd love to. What's that song? And I used to know the name, and it's like it goes into this like boom, boom, like. Oh, my daddy, oh. Something like, what's that song? That Metallica
song? Shoot. I know it, but... maybe it's their cover of Whiskey in the Jar? Yeah, their cover of Whiskey in the Jar.
It's Whiskey in the Jar. It's Whiskey in the Jar, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cover?
A number of artists have done it. It's an old Irish drinking song. Like, it's just... one of those older songs that's gained traction and gotten so well known. I don't know who's the most famous person for doing it, but I love their cover of it.
Dude, their cover of it, I listened to it, I'm like, this is what Metallica should be. I would love this, like, all the time. Like, they had that pop in there, but it had, like, that Metallica, just like that, that metal players restraining themselves, but it sounds like a Japanese, like, man, I don't know if you know about this, but Japanese cover bands, they're like so tight, it's like they're robots. It's like they're perfect robots who were made to cover the song. And that's what it felt like with them, were these guys who are used to just going all out, you know, B to W, B's to the W, and they're perfectly restrained, and they're doing everything, like everything's purposeful, and it's poppy, and it's good, and I thought that was amazing, and especially if it was an old Irish folk song, and they turned it into that. Why are you guys playing, sorry Chris, I'm sorry to do this, but why are you playing metal if you can do that?
Because people love metal, Christian. The band loves it.
I know.
The basis of the name.
I know. Metal musicians are true musicians. They're so far beyond me. I'm just like, how can you be so smart and play just math? Why are you playing math, dude? Why don't you play something?
I've got to say, just because when we've talked favorite covers, legit, some of my favorite covers are by Metallica. They cover other songs like Nobody's Business. They can make it they can put their own stamp on it, right? While still paying a lot of homage. Their cover of Tuesday's Gone by Lynyrd Skynyrd, I love. It's got another vocalist, I can't remember his name, but then there's a harmonica virtuoso on it, and it's a jam. It's an acoustic jam cover I just recorded. I love it. Their cover of what's Bob Seger's Turn the Page. I love that cover. As much as I'm not as comfortable listening to early Misfits anymore.
Yeah.
Just because the lyrics go where the lyrics go. It's still like their covers of it are incredibly tight. But I enjoy their original output and all that. But I wasn't planning on getting down the Metallica rabbit hole. Just because we mentioned Linkin Park earlier, and it was interesting. Now I do want to say, bullying sucks. the joking point was fair, but also it's that part.
Linkin Park,
anyway.
yeah, the dude killed himself. Yeah. I totally know. I forgot about that.
Well, but so it's so at the time their first album came out, I remember because you lived over on Dawes at that time. We were in 8th grade. I'd walk over to your school, walk over to your house, your apartment, and then we'd walk over to school together. And on my way over, I'd be able to listen to the first couple tracks from Hybrid Theory. And at the time, I really dug it. And then they got in the end, which I'll argue is a good song. Amazing, no, but it's good. Yeah. It's good. That's one I can go back to. But for the longest time, just because by the time I got to high school, they got in the end hit, and it was such a massive single that suddenly all their stuff was overplayed. It was like a good 6 years where I'm like, I hate Linkin Park. Yeah. I can't stand them. They're everywhere. And our mutual friend Kino at one point tried to be like, oh, they're one of the best voices in music, and I'm like, the Beatles, and he's like, no, I prefer them. I'm like, no. So it was another case of fans ruining the band for me, but then also overexposure. But now, like later when I was eventually able to go back to that band, I can still enjoy that band. I can enjoy their early output, but there are certain songs where I'm like, this is not because of the style, but because of how the lyrics, where I'm like, this did so much to this time period. Yeah. So the song "One Step Closer," when you it's a solid enough song. But when you get to that bridge where it's just like, shut up when I'm talking, I'm like, ugh, this, or another example is from a band from that time, Disturbed, when they did that Down with the Sickness song. Yeah. The song is what that song is, but there's whole reason, oh, Mom, do that. And you're like, what is this? What? And it's so dated to 1999 in music. Yeah. Where you're like, yeah, this was a thing that we briefly did.
What was that? They came out with wasn't there a new song they came out with it was right before he killed himself, right? Like they were just about to go on like a tour or something.
I think so. I'm not sure.
I remember. Yeah, it was like their new, like it was like, oh, we're sort of, it was a reboot sort of the band, right? And I remember that song came out, and I was like, oh, I think it was in my late 20s. And I was always put off by them, but I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. Like I haven't heard anything from Linkin Park. Apparently this is like their new thing, right? They're reinventing them, or they're coming out again. And so I listened to it and I'm like, this is actually like, I don't think it's necessarily my sort of thing, but it's something that I can definitely say like, I don't dig it, but I understand, like I respect it, right? Which is something I really couldn't say too much about their earlier stuff, like the stuff they came out with when I was young. But the new thing, I was like, good for you guys. Like, I think you found something good. Like, it's not whiny. It's dramatic still, which is like, it's all like, I'm down with something dramatic, man. Like, I like songs that make you feel like you're on the top of a tidal wave at the end of the world and it's about to crash down. Like, you're Noah right there on the cusp, and you got your boat and you're just riding it, right? I love songs like that. Like, but and it was really sad to me that he died, because it seemed like I was like, this is a band that I could actually like. This is the band that I could say, hey man, like, they're actually cool now. Go check them out, right? It was just, it was really sad. It was really sad. I mean, it's sad, period. But
I get what you mean. I didn't think that was callous or anything. Yeah. Like.
No. Well, I am, dude. I have to, like, there's one thing I'm just going to admit to myself. Like, I'm so long. I'm like, I'll say horrible things that I don't necessarily believe, really, right? Because in like the next day I'll say something. And it's like, but how come you're not applying that same logic to the thing you were talking about yesterday? And I realized, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be saying anything about anything. I probably shouldn't be talking. So, yeah, I don't know what I was. I don't know, man. Yeah. Most of my opinions, even I don't. They're probably. I'm willing to be. I'm willing to admit I'm wrong.
All right. I'm gonna wrap this up soon. It's just since we're talking music, one stuff I enjoy music that can make you feel. Matthew Good band was so good.
Load Me Up. That's one, dude.
Apparitions from the album Before Beautiful Midnight is a tremendous track.
Oh yeah, no, dude. I mean, he has two of his songs are they fit that rubric, that end of the world epic, you're on a wave rubric. Load Me Up and Hello Time Bomb.
Yeah. So good.
Those choruses, dude. When it kicks in, oh no. It's powerful. Like I've always wanted to recreate that. Like a lot of my songs do that. Like even the ones that aren't super hard, they'll always be soft. And when the chorus comes in, it's supposed to drive you. It's supposed to pick you up. Like that's "Smells Like Teen Spirit." Those two songs I mentioned. Like I could probably name off like almost any Linkin Park single. Like when the chorus kicks in. Deftones are huge about that. That's like that's every Deftones song ever, right? No, dude, they're the best at it. Like their production, the guitars are so wide and they're so thick, but they're not like muddy. They still have definition. There's one thing about the Deftones, man. I don't know, they do guitars like nobody else does. It's
been a long time since I visited the Deftones. Oh man, that takes me back. I might have to visit them later. The other band, I can't remember the name because it's mostly just one guy, but Abandoned Pools is a terrific alternative rock band. So they're
I don't even know that band.
Where you'd know them is they did the theme song to Clone High, but then also. They had a song that featured in that show like once or twice, Start Over. But their second album, I think it was called Renegade, is really, really solid. And it's got the song Renegade is a great song, but then also Maybe Then Someday and the Goodbye song, both of them, I'm like, those, especially at the time they came out, they beat the entire emo game. I was like, this is the best like non-Weezer emo I've heard. And that like it was also pre My Chemical Romance, which I argue is a different kind of emo. Like, and again, that Black Parade album is just so bloody good. Yeah, man, I it's so interesting with music how I appreciate it now, especially talking with guys, just because when we're young, we were so wrapped up in like, music is like my identity, and like you said, like politics is the new music, but it was like so staunch in your opinion of like, no, classic rock is the best, or no, nobody touches Nirvana, or like metal is. It's something I didn't agree with other people who like metal, like it's metal or nothing, where I'm like, no, there's some really good music that's not metal, and then also being able to recognize like, look, light and fluffy can be fun. Like, there's room for pop music, guys. Therefore, it's a different thing entirely.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to be like, no, it's this and everything else is garbage, but especially that, where it's like, man, there's so much more to enjoy. There's so much more to enjoy. Like,
oh yeah, no, man. I was just thinking about high school, like, and it's interesting because I was going to make that point about, remember earlier when you were talking about that individual you were talking to at your work?
Right.
And I said, how old are they? And you're like 25. And I thought they were more like along the lines of 16 or 15, where stuff like that is their identity and they haven't experienced enough of the world yet to understand what it is, right? And I think that's a huge component where with us and with teenagers, where like, this music or this show or this book, they're my identity, because you don't know who you are. You haven't, it's not even that you don't know who you are. You haven't lived enough to be a thing, really. Like, not everyone, dude. Some people are, they're like old souls. They are. Or some people have a good idea as to what they think about the world and what they think about themselves, what they think about people at a young age. And I think those people are they probably just had really good parents.
Yeah.
But I think, I think it's a substitute for an identity, right? Like, obviously. And it's the easiest one to do. And, who's going to defend a substitute identity more voraciously than someone who A, doesn't understand what they're doing, doesn't understand that they're using it as a proxy for an identity, and B, doesn't have one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. So next time when we do this, I definitely think let's talk music more, man. It's so much fun to talk about music. I forgot how much I enjoy. Like, I listen to music all the time, but I forgot how much I enjoy talking about it. Because for the longest time, it became like, I'll talk about movies. I'll talk about all the other interests. Because for a long time in my younger years, it was like my main music and movies. But then it's discovering like other things, comics, video games, and all that. Where I'm just like, man, I miss talking about like how good the Beatles were.
Oh.
Or in my case at times being like, no, man, I know it's just bubblegum pop, but I don't care. Backstreet Boys are fun to sing along with.
Yeah, I used to know all the words, and I've been to their concerts and all that stuff. Man,
dude, if Jill and I are having a carpool karaoke, you bet we are throwing on The Call by the Backstreet Boys. It's just a blast to sing along with together. Like it just absolutely is. Like, and it's just the fun that like that's where I've been with music for a while. I started a while ago, but now we're at, it's like, look, it's so many times we have this all or nothing. Like it has to be this and it has to be this always. It's like, look, if I want some deep artistry, I've got people I can go to for that. I've got the Beatles that I can go to for that. The Beatles is a great example of a band who also, like, if I want the light, fluffy bubblegum stuff, I've got the earlier stuff as well. Like, if I want something deep, I can go to Prince. I can go to, if I want something fantastical or historical, I can go to Maiden, Iced Earth. You've got so many things, so it's just like, why just pigeonhole into one, right? Like, if I want something like that's gonna get me amped up, I can go to like Rise Against because they're catchy and good. Those things don't have to be exclusive, but
no, I think that's sort of I don't think there are rules like that anymore. I at least as an adult, right? And if you meet someone who does believe in rules like that, then I mean that's a huge red flag. It's like, oh, okay, I don't need to talk to this person. But yeah, no, dude, there's things we didn't talk about because I wanted to like start figuring out how we would do like the Superman thing.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about like maybe like how I would go about doing my own thing. And I like what you said. Like I like how when we start talking about music, we really get into it. Like it's really, and I think other than like, the way it's different from like politics or the other sort of stuff is that I think we both were a lot. Like there's not a lot of facts.
No, it's opinion.
That you have to know. There's not a lot of truths that we got to keep track of. So
it's like the subjectiveness of it, and that's what I enjoy about it.
Yeah, it's our tastes mixed with the subjectiveness of the subjective nature of the topic mixed with us as people and the way that we sort of view each other and music and I think it's a very good like it's rare. It's like there's like a little dip, and when we get into talking about music we sort of get in there and it's comfy and it's cool, and I like it too, man. But it made me think about how we were talking about like focused episodes and stuff, and there's just part of me that's like I really want to do them because I listened back to the episode we did last time and I realized I'm saying all these things that like I sort of believe, but it's more passion than logic, and it's more passion than information and facts. And I'd really like to, if I'm going to express my opinion to other people, then I'd really like to get everything down, right? I'd like to, if someone were to say to me, oh, I feel this way about what you said, or what you said was wrong, I'd like to be able to say, oh, I have these facts right here, support my opinion. And it's one, like, I just came across as someone who's slightly knowledgeable, more passionate than pragmatic, and I don't like that. I didn't like that at all. I was just like, I shouldn't be talking about things that if I don't know the entirety of it, right? And I'm like, a good way to combat that would be to sit down and do research, and we both come at it and say, this is what I learned. What did you learn, right? But at the same time, that's a lot of work, and I'm like, man, do I even care about any of this stuff? Like, do I have a stake in the world, period? Like, do I? I'm like, do I even care? But yeah, man, that stuff is really, I don't know. I think that's something I'm sort of trying to decide for myself lately, where how much do I want to participate in the world, right?
Sorry.
And if I'm going to, I don't want to do it flippantly.
I get that entirely. It's heck, like, why most of I do feel like on this podcast, the times we do talk about real things or heavier things, But it's also like, it's why I enjoy doing the like, I like talking about nerdy things. I like sharing the opinion. I like to get knowing other people's perspective. And it's easier to do that through those things because you don't have the subjective weight, right? Like you can now, as you're saying, like we can prep. A great practice example of that is we are going to do that in series. So one of the ones we could do is it could be like, hey, why don't you and I visit? Here's a practical example. We can Superman 2, the original, the film. There's two cuts. There's the release cut, and then in the early 2000s they released the Donner cut because Donner was originally the director on it, and he had a much different vision, and so you got a different film out of it. So out of that could be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to watch both cuts of Superman 2. Prep your, like, jot some notes down. Like, what do you think of each one? Do you see why they went with this one instead of this one? Which one did you prefer? That kind of thing. Because that's where it's the practice of working while doing the podcast, but then also without the added weight, right? I sent you the notes. I didn't release it as an episode, but I did the video of Godzilla 98, or I just called it Zilla 98, where I'm just, all right, here's an exercise. I'm going to see what I can take from this, even though I know I don't like this movie. And then as I took notes, I'm like, all right, you know what? There is some good here. There's some good here. There's long sections where I'm just ripping it to shreds because the character of Audrey is the worst, but it's still like, it made getting through it as well, like much, it made me stick around for it, which I was glad for, because I was like, if I wasn't doing this for this, even though nobody's asked for this, I would have jumped out of the movie in the second act. And then the third act, even though it's got flaws, it was pretty good. I was like, you know what? Doing this helped.
Yeah. It's weird, man, because when it comes down to like the political stuff or like the history stuff, it's like
there's so much weight.
It's weird. There's so much weight, but there's so much like there's so much I know that like it would be difficult to find. Like I gotta remember, like, oh, you know, we could cover it from this angle, which maybe not a lot of people would know, but most people don't know this little piece of information. And with this information, it changes literally everything, right? And that happens over and over and over again. It's just like, also, it's kind of like, you know, it's a lot easier to just be passionate and rattle off things that you sort of remember, right? Yeah. It's a lot easier, and it's more emotionally satisfying, and it's more like, yeah, and it's you know, it's really,
it's also admittedly, like, as much as I enjoy doing the reels, it's also admittedly much less scary to do the other ones where you're like, I can be passionate and but it's also like, I don't have to worry about someone misinterpreting what I'm saying or accidentally in my passion saying something that came off, even though it wasn't my intent, as horrifically offensive.
That's the other thing, right? Where I'm trying to that's another thing I'm trying to decide for myself. Like, hey, man, because at some point you can't compromise to every single person's sensitivities and inclinations. So at one point you're gonna have to say, yeah, I am a jerk. Yeah, I don't care. I really don't care.
Exactly, and that's fair. That's fair. But it's also just like it's a challenge to get to there. So I think,
yeah, man. I want to be a man who says things he actually believes in, who can stand up for the things that he says. I don't want to be this childish, I'm just going to spout things out of anger and passion. That's ridiculous. You don't change the world like that. You don't change minds. You don't change hearts. You don't display character. That's not a quality person, right? But it's scary to come to terms with that fact, and also to say, oh, the amount of work it's going to take for me to be that man, do I care that much? Like, and then it's like, and if you don't, then you kind of got to say, okay, man, I can't talk about this stuff anymore, because like all I'm doing is like getting that I'm feeding my ego there, that little thing that likes to get angry and feel what is that word? Righteousness.
That rage.
that rage. Yeah, and I think maybe that's why they're writing, because they'll have to sit down and learn 20 years worth of new facts.
Or maybe they're just like, no, the whole album we'd just end up being like, F you to everybody. And then it's like, ooh.
Yeah, well, because
Everybody angers us
like
now.
I liken it to like, because I liken it to like me having to sit down and actually like sort through my own thoughts and figure everything out would be like them having to sit down and write an album. And it's like if I could just get away with getting paid like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to just keep doing like to be a Rush Limbaugh or something, right? Then would I fight that? Would I not just do that? I don't know.
Oh man, yeah. So all right. So I think that the Superman series can be that exercise because if we're gonna do it right, and like the thing is, at times enough stuff where you can do it right while not doing the work, but we can still do it where it's like, okay, no, let's visit that. So we'll plan that. I'll message you not later today, later this week with some suggestions. If you're down for it, let's do we can do the comparison of the Superman 2s. Just because, would you rather not?
No, I mean maybe. I think as like a first foray into the thing, maybe not, because it's like, okay, I have to. I mean, I wouldn't really necessarily want to watch. I mean, it's not Superman 3,
or
right?
4.
So there's that. Yeah. So I mean, that's good, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, it might be a slog to get through it the first time, and then having to watch the second one, slightly different version. Maybe just as a one-off for the first go, like just one viewing.
We can do that.
Okay. Because I am willing to buy like a whole run of comics though.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like read this whole series.
The DVD one, the movies is cheaper, but I get what you're saying. Okay, yeah, no, yeah. I'll message you with some ideas for later this week. All right, so you're also thinking of doing your own podcast, sir?
Yeah, man, I really am, because like again, we have all these funny episodes with the 5 of us. I'm like, we shouldn't be wasting them. I mean, and then there's also, but I'm thinking like, I don't know what I would have to offer, right? Like I don't.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. For me, at times where I'm like, I don't ever ask myself that question.
What? You never asked yourself what would I have to offer?
Yeah, no, I just try not to.
Well, that's healthy. That's probably smart, dude.
Just because, like, I do feel I have stuff to offer. I do. But at times, the reason I don't ask myself that question is the anxiety and the depression, the existential crisis that comes with it. So the thing is, like, what
I live in that. That's like baseline for me.
What I love about podcasts is, like, I never look at someone like, oh, what do they have to offer? It's like, look, it's their opinion, their viewpoint. Even if I don't agree with it, it's a long form where I can understand. I can come away from an understanding more about why they enjoy something, why they feel this way. And it's to me, I'm like, this is the best version of social media, because it's the long format where you can get to know the heart and the opinion of someone, not the 240 characters or less, like, clickbaity thing. Where
inflection is huge.
You can hear the inflection. You can hear, like, podcasts are, to me, so good. They're so good. Like, and it's a great way to learn more about something where you're like, I might have an interest in that, and it's a way for you to explore your interest, right? Like, it can be on here we've addressed heavy topics. We'll address stuff from a Christian perspective, but then at other times it's like, look, man, I just want to talk about Superman because I enjoy talking Superman. I enjoy talking comics. Like, so it's an exercise for me. I love doing it because it gets me out of my own head. Right now, where I'm definitely, like, maybe more sensitive or protective of it is, like, we're in a lockdown. It's my main thing right now.
Yeah.
Like,
well, dude, also I noticed you're getting ads, right? Like, people are I assume they're paying you.
There's ads in the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. The money comes in later, but I saw through Podbean, it's like, oh yeah, put ads in. But when the podcasts play, when I play them through Podbean, I don't hear any of those ads.
Oh, weird, dude. Yeah, when I play it through. I got this this app called Pocket Cast.
Okay.
And it's really cool because you can actually, it'll cut out the silence in between. Like if there's a long pause, it'll cut that out. You can also decide, oh, I want to skip the first 4 minutes of this podcast every episode because there's always a long intro, so it'll always start right when it's supposed to. Little things like that. It's really interesting. But yeah, man, I always hear the ads on that. Like they're just ads for like, you know, Christian podcasts or just like stuff nerdy
those
podcasts.
Those I put in. Those aren't ads from like I don't make money off of that. Those are from other podcasts that I listen to, and I'm like, hey, I really like your stuff. Can you send me an ad? So then at times when I'm like, I need to take a break, where it's like I'll be right back. That's where I'm like, I'm just going to throw that ad in.
It's very sweet of you to say, hey, I enjoy what you're doing. I want to support you. Do these people ever respond back and say, hey, can I put an ad for your podcast?
We haven't done, like, I haven't recorded an ad, but some of them through reaching out, it's like, hey, I've done appearances on, like, the other thing I love about podcasting is I've made friendships, like good friendships, through it, where that's where I'm like, it's such a good medium. So that's when someone's like, I'm thinking about it, I'd be like, dude, just do it. Just go for it. I mean, like, the thing is, don't, for me, at times I try not to look at the downloads because at times I'll be very excited, and then other times I'm like, oh man, that didn't click. And then you get on that depressing kick of like, why am I doing this? Blah, blah, blah. Where it's like, look, but at the end of the day, like, it's been downloaded like the entirety of the show. I've been doing it for years. I've forged some friendships. There's been the total amount of downloads, and it's like, look, this is something I have fun doing. Why not? Yeah. So I don't, if you don't have that for that, like, oh, it's going to be the huge resonance and the huge audience, so all that, like, do it for you. And then if that success comes, which of course I'd love it. Yeah. And I'd love it for you or anybody else. But if it gets there, then you do that as it comes. Yeah. But if it's just that expectation, like right off the bat or within the first whatever.
Oh, you're going to cripple yourself.
Yeah. You're setting yourself up for a lot of like just depression and anxiety and feeling defeated.
No, nothing good will come of it. And that's something that I've been wondering lately. I kind of feel like, man, like I'm noticing my depression. Like for the longest time, like I didn't really, like I noticed it, but I'm noticing, you know, like when you're so deep in it and it's been going on for so long, you don't realize that that's not reality, right? Like, so I start to think like, you're like, oh, I've made friends, and recently there's so many times where I thought to myself, I'm like, the things that like other people get joy out of, like talking to people or sharing, like just being a good person, like I'm just like, I don't get joy out of that. I don't get joy out of almost anything. Like it doesn't, like I'm like the only, and I'm realizing like, what would make you excited? Like if someone were to come to you, if a friend were to call you up, and what would they have to say to really make you get out of your own head and over yourself? And I'm like, well, they would have to say, hey, I found you a great job. Hey, I found you a great place to live. Here, we'll get you working and get you the hell out of here. And you can actually start being a person again. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I've gotten to the point where I'm so depressed, I'm so dissatisfied with who and where I am, that the only joy I can get out of interacting with another person would be if they were to come and miraculously fix everything wrong with my life. And I'm thinking like, that's depression, dude. That is depression, 100%. Like, and not only that, but it's like you've ignored everything that you don't like about your life and yourself for so long that you're sort of like, I'm getting to the point where I have to decide, like, do I just have to not care anymore? Like, do I have to accept, like, this is who and what I am? Or am I going to fight it now? Because if I don't fight it now, then it is going to be who I am, right?
Right.
But yeah, man, I've been really trying to fight that because I'm like, I do. Like, after we talk, like, if we talk or if I talk with you guys, I feel better after. Like, I do get something out of it. But to think about it beforehand, I'm like, I don't have it in me. I don't. Like, it's just work. It's all work. And,
oh, man, dude, I get that entirely. Well, heck, there's been days where, like, we were going to record last week. I'm like, look, man, I need a day. I need a day.
Yeah, dude, I was in it. I was in it.
No way. It was the sudden thing on the Thursday where I was handing stuff back where I'm like, I just need a day. I need a day of not doing anything. Like once that, like I was already feeling exhausted that week, but once that was coming up, I'm like, even though I know this is going to be positive, I know I'm still going to be feeling negative afterwards. And then I'm like, I can't. And then Friday, chatting with the guys was fun. It was good. But then also I was just like, I don't have it in me. I don't, because as much as I love doing this, and like I said, the friendships I've made like Bex from Redeemed Otaku. We've become really, really good friends. And she's been such a prayer warrior for me and Jill, and it's been so appreciated. That in my depression, as I've not consciously but subconsciously like pulled back from people or been feeling like I can't do this, like having those friends, I'm like, oh, this is someone I can. So I've really appreciated that. But then on the flip side, though, doing this, like as good as it is, as much as I love it, also it's good to get me out of my just out of my funk. But then also at the end of it, I'm like, man, I'm done. Like I'm just like guaranteed after we hang up in a couple minutes, I'm gonna be like, hon, I'm exhausted. Like it's not like I'm on, but you're in a different zone when you're on a podcast. Especially when you're hosting. Like when it's like it's your vision, it could even on the lighter stuff afterwards, you're like, oh man, like my energy reserves that were shallow before, they're like depleted. They're like -40 right now.
It's like it's not even like it's in the moment, it's giving you energy, right? But then you realize afterwards, you're like, oh wow, it actually took all of that. The energy was temporary. It was brought up for me in that moment, and now it's taken away.
Well, it's interesting though, because it's like you're like the energy's gone, but the good like you said, after chat or after like we do the Skype calls and all that, I'm like, man, I'm feeling drained, but I'm also feeling good. Like
I'm not as angry as I'm
not feeling drained and like really just anxious or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm in a better spirits while being like just I'm done. I'm fried. Like don't ask me to do anything.
That's fighting the depression, right?
Yeah.
It's like just knowing like, oh crap, like this is gonna be good for me eventually, but like trying to get there is a pain in the ass. What the frig?
All right, dude. So we went like almost 45 minutes over.
We should. I mean, I'm fine with that. I expected.
I know. Jill's just going to be like, "Oh, this was a shorter one for you."
I gotta remember. I told you before this. I gotta say this. On the last podcast, I said my mom just left a job at the CRA willy nilly. Apparently, the conditions weren't that great, and. You know, I think from the way she described it, I would have left too. I don't think any reasonable person would have stayed. But it doesn't change the fact that at the time, she didn't think, oh, I'm not going to be able to get another job this good. She thought, oh, I have to leave because this is crazy. I'll just go get another job, right? Other people would be like, they just deal with it, right?
That's not to belittle your mom in any way, but...
No. Oh man, I don't. Yeah, she's great. She's great. Yeah.
I always appreciate her support. Legit, like almost every episode I post, there's like 99% of the time I like from her. I'm like, just like, oh, that's so sweet. Like it's a nice little pick me up.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't see anybody else's mom except for your mom doing that. Right?
Well, it'd be weird if some of the other guys' parents suddenly like that. I was like, I didn't even know you were on Facebook. We haven't had a conversation in years.
Yeah, like, if Mike's mom started liking your stuff, like, what the heck is going on?
I don't know if I can talk about anything now. And I don't even talk about bad things.
I'm like, what is Mike's mom getting out of this podcast? I don't understand. Mike's parents are fascinating to me. Like I'm like trying to.
It's also interesting for me. Not gonna lie. Like there's been times where I'm talking about stuff, and then I've even said like, "Look, this is awkward to talk about because I know my mom listens to this podcast. Like every once in a while, I'll get a text message from her being like, "Oh, I really like that." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why were you listening?" But it's because my mom is an incredibly loving and supportive woman. It's just kind of like it's just those times where you're like, "Hey, it's those." That's the other thing I'd say. Like, if you're launching if you're doing this, and dude, we'll talk after and more privately, but I will publicly say, like, color me interested. I would love it. Like, there's stuff in there. I know I'd be like, this isn't my cup of tea, but I'd love it. But that's the other thing where you're like, it's interesting just because when you're doing this, you're being you, but you're like, you want to represent, like, not in a fake way or anything, but like a good version of you. So that's where you're kind of like, look, I want to be able to talk about these things, but I want to talk about these things in a way, not in that ego way where it's like I'll be heard, but it's like I want to talk about these things or whatever they may be in a way where I'm not giving anyone a reason to be like, don't listen to that guy. Where it's like, you can disagree with me, but you can't pigeonhole me into being like, you said this very offensive thing. Where it's like, look, disagree with me. That's fine. But don't tell.
Yeah.
It's the case of where it's like, if I don't say anything bigoted, and you're just inferring something, that's on you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to be the type of person who you may not agree with, but you respect.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you respect the character. I want to have character. I want to be a man who's worth the words that he says that comes out of his mouth, you know? Like...
I definitely think you've got that in you. I 100% think you do. I would 100% listen to your podcast. And then also I know you'd have me on and then we'd just do an episode of you trying to make me uncomfortable.
We'd have to be sitting in the same room. Like, I'd have to make sure your eyes you can't avert your eyes from what I'm about to show you. Just look at it.
I can't stop this from happening.
It's this whole traumatic thing where like you're screaming and crying and I'm yelling at you. And at the end of the podcast, it was sitting there really civilized, like nothing happened. And I'm like, hey Chris, so you want to come back? And you're like, no.
The exact
I would never do that again. No.
Be the exact opposite of the puddle of mud thing from this morning, being like, oh, this doesn't have to happen to me. Click.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, dude. I'm gonna let you go, but we will definitely touch base soon. I'll message you later this week about some Superman stuff. I've got some ideas I'm toying around. So yeah, we'll touch base about that more, and we'll definitely talk more about you launching yours.
Okay, yeah. I mean, one good thing we could do is actually, like, I was thinking maybe we could watch a comedian special, you and me. Maybe we could do like a Netflix. Whoa, I like to say that I said Netflix. Okay.
I heard FOS. We're not even editing that because it didn't sound like that.
Like, I think that's the wrong website, dude. I don't think you're on the right one. Or we could do a Netflix party watch of like a comedian special, or something. No, maybe that wouldn't be that much fun. No, maybe I don't know. We'll think about it. But yeah, man. We're gonna end the podcast, but not the call, right?
Yes. Although I do gotta go. I gotta go soon, just because I gotta take Luna out again.
Okay.
But we'll keep the call going for another couple minutes for sure.
Okay. Cool.
All right, cool. All right, well, dear listener, thank you for listening. Hope everything's going well. Like Christian said, if you are battling depression, don't believe your anxiety and the paranoia. And I'd also like to add, like, please feel free to let us know, and I'd be happy to say a prayer for you. Again, that's not me trying to be like, oh, look, I'm praying for you. No, just message me. We'll keep it private. And also, I'd encourage, like, reach out to people. Talk to other people. Even just having someone to address that with can be so beneficial. All that being said, hope you're having a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless, my friends. Peace.